It is wonderful to have all of you here. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our info session on the Justice Catalyst Fellowship. The recording of the session is going to be posted on our website along with captioning. And you'll notice that we have the chat function turned off for today's webinar, so please don't chat us. We will be sharing information in the chat with all of you who are joining us live today, but we'll be taking your questions solely via the Q&A chat box. So we'll reserve time at the end of this session to answer your questions. This is a 90-minute session. And please go ahead and drop any questions that you have in the chat at any time. So I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Renee Schomp. I'm Deputy Director at Justice Catalyst Partnerships. I am a former Equal Justice Works legal fellow myself. I launched my career into the social impact legal space as a fellow and had the opportunity to work in the nonprofit sector for many years before joining Justice Catalyst Partnerships to run our fellowship program, work on our philanthropic endeavors, and also serve as a team member with Justice Catalyst Access Fund, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But before I continue talking at all of you, I'd love to hear from you about who is here with us today, just to get a sense of who's in the audience. So whether or not you are a current law student or a candidate who is a year or two out of law school interested in applying, maybe you are at a potential host organization, whether it's a nonprofit, union, government agency, firm, or maybe with a law school career office. Thank you. I'm seeing all of you answering that poll. I'll give you another moment as I still see some answers coming in, and it's really helpful to hear from you who all is joining. So I see that we have majority is current law students, and then also some folks from law school career offices and a handful of others. So thank you all so much for answering. It's really helpful to know who's here with us. Okay. So I want to briefly cover what we are going to talk about today. So we are going to go over a little bit about the Justice Catalyst Partnerships, Justice Catalyst Access Fund, just introduction of Justice Catalyst as a whole. Then I'm going to briefly mention a little bit about our antitrust legal fellowship, and then the bulk of our time will be spent focused on our project-based general Justice Catalyst Fellowship. And you're going to have the opportunity to hear from one of our current fellows. And I'll be talking to you about kind of some of the logistics for the application process. At the end, I'll cover some frequently asked questions, and I will take all of your questions, which, as a reminder for folks who are just joining, you're welcome to ask any questions in the Q&A chat box, which we'll be turning to at the end. And you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of both myself and Olivia. So a little bit about Justice Catalyst. We are a nonprofit that uses grant funding and philanthropic advising to support justice-focused legal innovation in a variety of ways. So we have a focus on seeding new organizations and sometimes projects at existing organizations, and on fostering collaboration between the different parts of the public interest legal system that we find are often very siloed. We have provided seed or early stage funding for dozens of organizations and projects, and some of the organizations or projects that we launch are relatively in-house. So we have a partner organization, Justice Catalyst Law, for example, that is focused on generating cases that have broad and replicable impact, often using commercial tools for social justice. So, for example, JCL is involved in antitrust litigation against the bail bond industry, antitrust and other legal theories against other parts of the prison industry, cases in the housing space, and more. And then another of our partner organizations is Justice Catalyst Access Fund, which is a nonprofit that provides recoverable grants to support both nonprofits and public interest law firms. This is a novel structure where organizations can draw down funds to support their work and repay out of case recoveries or fee awards, and only have to pay back out of those awards. And if they don't win, they don't have to. And then, of course, the Justice Catalyst Fellowship Program, which helps to launch new creative projects and new legal careers. So before I dive in again into our project-based Justice Catalyst Fellowship, I want to speak with you a little bit about our antitrust litigation fellowship. So some of you may be aware of this fellowship that launched just a few years ago. In partnership with the Committee to Support the Antitrust Laws, or COSAL, and it's focused on antitrust litigation, as I mentioned. And in this fellowship, fellows are placed at some of the top plaintiff-side firms across the country that are focused on antitrust litigation. So the Jonathan W. Cuneo COSAL Justice Catalyst Fellowship is focused on fostering a path for emerging leaders in antitrust litigation specifically to continue the pursuit of accountability against powerful entities. We believe that the enforcement of antitrust laws is really crucial to promoting class equity in the US, and that by preventing large corporations from dominating markets and engaging in anti-competitive practices, the antitrust laws help create a level playing field for small businesses and consumers, which leads to increased competition, innovation, and fair prices. This in turn can help reduce economic inequality and promote a more equitable distribution of wealth and opportunities for all. So just briefly, I want to name that we have a lot of details about this antitrust fellowship on our website that you can check out if you're interested. The timeline for application is right now, so it's earlier than our project-based fellowship. And it's focused on joining a plaintiff-side antitrust practice in the same way you would as any associate joining a firm. So rather than being project-based, you're joining the firm as, usually a first-year associate, but you can apply up to a few years out of law school as well. And other than, kind of being focused on regular antitrust litigation within that firm, because of the fellowship, you have added mentorship and opportunities for networking and collaboration in the larger antitrust field, thanks to COSAL and Justice Catalyst. So again, feel free to check out information on our website or email us at fellowships@justicecatalyst.org if you have any questions about that. Okay, so with that, I want to dive into our project-based Justice Catalyst Fellowship. And I also just want to name a quick thank you to my colleague Scott, who is taking care of the slides and all the technical back-end details for me today. Thank you so much, Scott. And Scott is going to be dropping some information and really helpful links throughout this webinar in the chat for those of you who are joining us live. So the Justice Catalyst Fellowship philosophy is problem-centric. Successful projects start with a problem in the world and identify the novel and potentially transformative ways to address it by bringing or catalyzing affirmative litigation. We're focused on broad-scale change or systemic work in the litigation space specifically. And we have a special interest in projects that use systemic litigation to generate direct benefits at scale, such as damages, class actions, or legal enforcement against powerful interests like private corporate defendants or government actors. And I've noted this before, but I do want to just name that in past years, the Justice Catalyst Fellowship had a slightly broader focus. And then in more recent years, we've shifted our focus to exclusively support projects that emphasize litigation versus, for example, direct individual representation, policy advocacy, community organizing, or research. And I'll talk more about this focus later on in the webinar. So let's just quickly hit on the nuts and bolts of the fellowship. Our hope is that the Justice Catalyst Fellowship provides recent law school graduates with an opportunity to begin their legal career by undertaking a boundary-pushing project that addresses a pressing problem in the United States. And we really hope that candidates will think outside the box of what our law school institutions or what our legal system and legal institutions traditionally push about the way that we think about the law and our legal system as a whole. So the basics are available to read on our website, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them right now, but in short, this is an opportunity for a recent law school graduate to partner with either a nonprofit organization, a government agency at any level, a union, or a plaintiff-side or public interest private law firm to propose an innovative legal project that you'll work on for 1 year or possibly longer. Um, Folks receive a $76,000 salary support stipend, which is provided to the host organization. Some fellows are paid more than that by their host organization, which is great. And in some rare circumstances, for example, if there's a union contract, less may be necessary. That's a conversation to be had between the candidate and the host organization at the front end of the application process. And then there's also potential for additional monetary support for the project or the fellow to launch a new nonprofit or initiative coming out of their fellowship term. A little bit about eligibility. So again, all of this is available on our website, but briefly, I want to just mention that candidates must have graduated from an accredited US law school with either a JD or LLM degree within a couple of years prior to the application deadline. And in limited cases, we also accept applications from non-attorneys, for example, from jailhouse lawyers. Host organizations, so candidates partner with an eligible 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization or a plaintiff-side or public interest law firm, a union, or a government agency, whether that's tribal, local, state, or federal, and you work collaboratively with the host organization on your project design. So the project is an innovative litigation-focused project that has strong potential to catalyze structural and broad scale, aka high volume change within the United States. A little bit more about host organizations. So we're open to non-traditional host organizations. They can be small and scrappy. You do need to have significant litigation supervision. And again, unlike a lot of other fellowships, you can be based at a union or government agency or plaintiff side or public interest law firm as well. A lot of folks, though, are based at 501(c)(3) nonprofits. In terms of who is driving the design and creation of the project idea and plan, we are agnostic as to who drives that. The fellow or the host can come up with the seed of the idea. It's ultimately just most important that both the candidate and the host organization are on the same page. And we've had successful projects that come from many different sources. So the bottom line is when you're finding a host organization to partner with on the application process, focus on what's going to be the best fit for both the project and for you, and take into consideration elements like expertise and mentorship. So be realistic about your personal needs and desires in terms of mentorship. If you're going to be based at a small, scrappy organization, be realistic about, is that going to be a good fit for who I am and how I'll be working at this stage in my career? Also think about what resources to advance your project the host organization has. If you're engaged in major affirmative litigation, do they have the resources necessary or the partnerships necessary to support that project? And on that note of partnerships, make sure, if necessary, that they have the coalition and other relationships needed with key stakeholders that will help you implement your project. Finally, make sure that your host organization has a commitment to the issue area your project addresses, the approach, and the fellowship project as a whole. We have found that a lot of successful applicants apply for the Justice Catalyst Fellowship with a host organization where they previously interned or with a host organization they've collaborated with through their work at a law school clinic, but that's not a prerequisite for success by any means. Okay, a little bit about the application timeline. I'm not going to linger on this too long. It's available on our website. But in short, there's prospectuses that are open starting September 1st, so coming up very soon. And then the application form is going to open on our website October 19th, and it will close on December 1st. And I'm going to cover a lot more details about the prospectus and the application in the coming slides, as well as the fellowship programming. But first, I want to talk a little bit about priority areas of work for the fellowship. So, first of all, we have no issue area restrictions whatsoever. We welcome projects that are focused on any and all issue areas. The fellowship program is primarily US focused, but we occasionally support projects based outside of the country that have a close nexus to the US. Scott is going to kindly drop a link in the chat to information about one of our recent fellows, Henna Kashal, who had a project that serves as a good example of one that's based outside of the US in Mexico City, but is focused on enforcing US labor laws and also overlaps with US immigration matters. So we get excited about proposed projects across a very broad spectrum of topic areas. And as you can see, if you go on our website and look at current and past fellows, each year we award fellowships focused on a really wide range of topics. We do have a list of priority issue areas that you can see here. Some are, and many are, focused on where we see a lack of traditional philanthropic or other sponsorship support of legal work. And then also where we've seen less applications than we'd like to see, or where we think there's just a especially high opportunity for impact. And then I also just want to name, for many of you who may be thinking about this, that we recognize a lot of projects will touch on multiple overlapping issue areas. And in our application, you'll have the opportunity to note which you view as the primary issue area and which you see as ancillary or overlapping issue areas. With that, I'd really love to hear from those of you who are here, especially since we have a wide range of potential candidates with us on this Zoom. What issue areas are you currently thinking about for your possible project? So I'll let you all take a moment. So here's some of our priority issue areas: access to medications for opioid use disorder, antitrust, civil rights, climate and environment, consumer rights, corporate accountability, democracy and voting rights, disability rights. We have a really wide range here that you can choose from, and I'm seeing the answers coming in. I'm going to give you another moment. Okay, great. I'm seeing a high volume, almost half interested in civil rights issues, 8% in antitrust, 17% in climate and environment, 13% in consumer, 12% in corporate accountability, 15 in democracy and voting rights, 23% in economic justice, 10% in government accountability and transparency, 18% in immigration, 28% in incarceration criminal legal system. This is a multi-choice, in case you're wondering. Really wonderful to see 22% in racial justice, 18% in workers' rights. Really helpful to hear the interest areas that all of you have, a very large amount in civil rights there. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really helpful, and it's wonderful to be here with so many people interested in so many critical issues that we are excited to support. So let's talk a little bit about the priority strategies for justice that we support. So I think this is probably the most important part to listen to. So first of all, we support innovative litigation-focused projects that use the law creatively and strategically to achieve broad-scale change. So a lot of projects employ class actions, systemic litigation, or replicable legal strategies to deliver meaningful impact. All fellowship projects should be focused on litigation, but the scope of focus can be number one, specific litigation, where we see the highest volume of applications and where we will select the highest volume of applications. Number two, an organization, project, or practice group. Or three, supporting the social impact litigation ecosystem. So I'm going to speak in a moment about each of those three project categories in depth. Also, Scott has dropped in the link guidance about all three project categories. One thing that I really want to emphasize is that across all strategies for fellowship projects, a key element for us is projects that target powerful actors. We like projects that raise the cost of doing injustice, sometimes quite literally. For example, damages cases against private actors like corporations or prisons and jails. So as I mentioned, Scott is dropping in the chat a link to a web page that details the three categories of fellowship projects along with examples and tips. And for those of you who are candidates, especially, I recommend open that up right now and follow along as I talk through each category. It's a really helpful reference point. So as I mentioned, the first and most common category of fellowship projects focuses on filing and or litigating a significant affirmative litigation matter. We tend to prioritize litigation that is focused on enforcing laws already on the books or that is advancing a replicable legal strategy rather than litigation that's primarily trying to shift legal precedents. So for affirmative litigation projects, think about the timeline. So since litigation can take many years, at what point in the course of the litigation is your fellowship project? It can be successful at different points throughout that litigation timeline, whether it's to get the litigation off the ground or to work on it at a key point in the litigation process. And think about the resources needed to conduct that litigation successfully and whether your organization has those resources or is part of a team, like a co-counsel team that has those resources. And then if the theory of change is that a court is going to give you a favorable decision, such as in projects focused on precedent-setting litigation, we really need to hear both why it's likely to be a successful strategy, as well as why it's a good idea. If the theory of change depends on a court setting favorable precedent that other courts, agencies, or actors will then follow, we want to hear both why it's likely to be a successful strategy as well as why it's a good idea. And if the idea is to get courts to agree with you, we want to hear why it's likely that they will, not simply that it would be good in principle if they did. And we believe that the most powerful litigation often uses the law strategically in a way that achieves the ends you want to achieve without relying on courts to be the agents of change or relying on judges to agree with you ideologically. If your fellowship project falls into the category of specific litigation, be prepared in your application to provide detailed, concrete information about the primary litigation you'll be focused on, such as I mentioned on the likely timeline for filing, if it's pre-filing, how much background work your host org will have already laid for you, or if you'll be starting from scratch, the barriers and corresponding solutions for your proposed litigation, information about potential jurisdictions, etc. And we recognize these details may change over time, but providing this level of detail right now helps us more deeply understand how you're thinking about the project. So an example of this category of project is one carried out by our recent Justice Catalyst fellow, Leah Fessler, who was based at a law firm called Kazali Wersch in St. Louis. Leah brought litigation focused on ending the Missouri Department of Corrections discriminatory practices of denying access to medications for opioid use disorder across Missouri prisons. You can find information about that project on our website, and Scott is going to also drop it in the chat, along with another concrete example, which is Jacqueline Lee, a current Justice Catalyst Fellow working at the nonprofit Client Earth to challenge illicit transfers of unproductive fossil fuel assets through strategic impact litigation in California and Colorado on behalf of classes of individuals that have suffered harm to their health or property due to the abandonment of polluting assets. So we're dropping some other examples in the chats, and I want to just let you all know that there are tons of project examples, both in the guidance that we link to on our website, as well as on our page that details all of our current and past Justice Catalyst Fellowship projects. Okay, let's talk about category 2 projects. So the second category of fellowship project is focused on using the fellowship to grow and strengthen an organization's litigation docket with a focus on building a sustainable practice that can support over time some or all of its costs by recovering fees from its cases. For example, the project might be to develop an affirmative practice in a place that's primarily defensive, such as at a legal aid or public defender's office. So we had a fellow based at NILAG, the New York Legal Assistance Group, working across 2 units that were primarily doing defensive litigation. And the fellow helped develop affirmative litigation counterclaims that could then be routinely added by all their other attorneys across those units. There's more information that Scott is dropping in the chat about that project. And then another example is a project establishing a civil rights litigation practice at a nonprofit or firm that was previously dedicated to criminal defense or innocence litigation that now wants to expand to bringing affirmative civil rights suits such as wrongful conviction or prison conditions litigation. Again, you can view more concrete examples of real fellowship projects that fall under this category on our website, including projects that are being carried out by our new cohort of fellows, including Lucy Harrell at the Atlanta Community Support Project and Malik Marshall at the nonprofit Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, or LANE, in partnership with the union Unite Here Local 11. A critical component of this category of projects is that they focus both on bringing new cases and also on creating a new practice area at the host organization, which will over time be able to cover some or all of its costs by recovering fees from cases. So for this reason, this is a project category that requires especially thoughtful and intentional collaboration with the host organization to conceive of and build. Category 3 projects. So the third category of project focuses on strengthening the broader ecosystem of social impact litigation by supporting or sustaining future litigation efforts and collaborations in a concrete way. So an example of this category of fellowship project is Justice Catalyst Fellow Michelle Dahl's project that was based at the National Police Accountability Project. It focused on creating a comprehensive resource hub and network to empower public defenders in developing civil rights litigation to address constitutional violations that they saw in their communities. So the resources were generated through work as co-counsel on civil rights litigation and in partnerships with public defenders across the country. Other examples of these projects include Tasha Shahari Parsa's project based at the NYU Wagner Labor Initiative and Lily Boo's project, which helped launch the Hub for Innovative Law Offices, or HILO. Again, Scott is dropping those examples in the chat, and if you're watching the recording of this webinar later, you can find those fellowship projects on our website. So a key aspect of projects in this third category is that there's a clear plan for bringing about the litigation with identified lawyers who are ready to partner to make it happen. Because there is no mileage in creating resources or toolkits that no one will ever know about or use. So that concrete element is really crucial to demonstrate to us in a Category 3 application. Okay, a lot of information. We would love to hear from all of you a little bit about which of these priority strategies for justice you are interested in if you are a current candidate. So we're going to pull up another poll and we'd love to hear from you. Are you thinking about a category one specific litigation project, a category two project focused on fomenting a new organization, project, or practice group, or supporting the litigation ecosystem? So I want to just let you know that yes, sometimes we see applications that might include focuses across these categories. We ask in your application, each application requests that you specify which category your project is focused on and has specific questions for each category. So we do ask that you choose a priority category and let us know if there's going to be some ancillary work that might fit under other categories. And as I mentioned before, we see the majority of projects focused on catalyzing specific litigation. And I see 60% of the respondents here have said that that's going to be their focus, and then 20% on category two and 14% on category three. I would say we generally select, like I said, a majority in category one, and then about even across category two and three, maybe a little bit more in two, but pretty even. And it really depends on the year on the applications we receive. Thank you all so much for answering that poll. It's really helpful to see what you're thinking as you're going into this application process. Okay, some quick final thoughts and a recap of all that detailed information I just shared. So, litigation is really at the core of every Justice Catalyst Fellowship project. And across all project types, we prioritize applications where filing new or meaningfully advancing existing litigation is a concrete and near-term likelihood, ideally within or shortly coming out of the first year of the fellowship. We do not select projects that emphasize direct legal services or small-scale litigation. And regardless of which category is the focus of your application, like I said earlier, many fellows also may work outside of their primary project. They may work on multiple different litigation matters. And as I noted in the past, if you're looking at past fellowship projects, some of them may not emphasize litigation as much because we have shifted over the last several years to this litigation focus more specifically. And again, I'll just underline that we're especially enthusiastic about projects that apply already existing laws to a new subject area or situation and view the law as a mechanism for compensating harmed groups and communities and holding powerful actors accountable for wrongdoing. A key emphasis across all project approaches is to ensure that your project has high potential to make broad scale, aka high volume impact. Okay, that is more than enough of me speaking at all of you. I am really excited and honored to welcome our current fellow, Olivia Fritz, who's going to share with you a little bit about her experience as a fellow and as an applicant. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Olivia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Renee. Thank you for having me. Should I just kind of go ahead into what my fellowship
Yeah,
has been?
yes,
Okay.
love to hear from you.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining this webinar. I'm excited to be here. My name is Olivia, and I am currently in the second year of my Justice Catalyst Fellowship with the MacArthur Justice Center's National Parole Transformation Project based in Chicago. My fellowship project focuses on challenging due process violations in Arkansas's parole revocation system. And I think some exciting things that have happened, in my fellowship thus far. Probably the biggest thing was filing a class action lawsuit in federal court back in February of this year. And in that lawsuit, we brought claims around Arkansas's failure to appoint counsel for low-income people at their revocation hearings. And for those who don't know, a revocation is when someone's parole is taken away and they're reincarcerated based on alleged violations of their parole conditions. Yeah, so bringing that class action lawsuit was like a big thing for my fellowship project. In that lawsuit, we also had kind of like a subclass of people with disabilities on parole who had not been or were not being screened for their disabilities or provided reasonable accommodation. So brought some claims under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Rehabilitation Act um, for them. And then that kind of the filing in early February set off kind of this whirlwind of filings and hearings. That ended at the end of the month with the court granting our request for a preliminary injunction and ordering that the defendants in our case, the Arkansas Parole Board and Arkansas Department of Corrections, implement changes to the revocation system, which was really exciting. Now we're kind of in the discovery process to see if they've actually been doing that. Just kind of thinking about other aspects of the Justice Catalyst Fellowship. So I think one reason I applied for the Justice Catalyst Fellowship, and this may be something that's already known, but it's kind of difficult to get a staff attorney position straight out of law school. Many employers expect anywhere from 2 to 5 years of post-law school job experience to hire staff attorneys. So that is a big reason that I wanted to do the Justice Catalyst Fellowship. That it would kind of give me the experience to make me competitive for permanent positions in the civil rights legal sector. I think I specifically was focused on Justice Catalyst as opposed to other fellowship funders, just because there weren't as many restrictions on the type of work you could do or the population you could serve. I think Renee just went over that pretty well, but thinking about some of the other fellowship funders, Skadden kind of made it clear, at least at the time I was applying 2 years ago, that they would not be taking on any projects serving incarcerated people, and that kind of extended even to people who are facing temporary incarceration, like the plaintiffs in my case were temporarily detained in county jails prior to their parole hearing. And that was even, something that they weren't willing to work with. And then another reason that I was excited by the Justice Catalyst Fellowship was that there is more of a focus on this kind of systemic litigation, which was what my fellowship project is. And that's kind of opposed to like Equal Justice Works, I know has more of a focus on direct services. And then finally, just Justice Catalyst really emphasized connecting with non-lawyers in developing the project. And I felt like that was a shared value that I had and that my host organization has. In the National Parole Transformation Project, we have an organizer as part of our team, and working with community groups was played a big part of like developing my fellowship project. It kind of came out of conversations we had with community groups where they highlighted that in Arkansas, revocations were a big driver of incarceration. And so those conversations led us to pursue this lawsuit. In terms of like tips for the application process for Justice Catalyst, I think building off what I was just saying, I know there's a question about like a listening tour in the application, like who have you spoken with about your project? Who would you like to speak with in the future? And I think I would really just encourage you to, first of all, tap into your host organization's network when thinking about who to contact. So just speaking with not only attorneys at your host org or attorneys who are doing litigation in kind of the same field, but organizers, impacted people, policymakers, anyone you can reach out to who is even kind of tangentially related to the work that you're hoping to do. In my case, not a lot of people just in general are doing parole work specifically. So it was hard to find someone who was like bringing parole litigation or working on parole justice issues and organizing, but kind of thinking beyond that to just like, well, who is working in the criminal legal space in Arkansas? I was able to connect with groups who were, led by formerly incarcerated people hoping to, work towards decarceration, or reentry organizations who helped people on parole. And even if the people I connected with at those organizations or with those groups didn't have a lot of expertise in parole revocations, they were often very helpful in connecting me to someone who actually did have more experience. And that was how we came across like more community partners and talked to attorneys who had more knowledge of this issue. And then I think just kind of maybe to wrap up my little title here is just an example of like a benefit of the Justice Catalyst Fellowship is really just being connected to the broader Justice Catalyst network. So in my first year as a fellow, one thing I really appreciated was that Renee was able to connect me with other former Justice Catalyst fellows in Chicago, and they kind of gave me some very helpful tips about just figuring out how to be a practicing attorney, what was helpful for them in developing their project and bringing litigation, like what were some tips for writing a complaint for the first time and things like that. So I really appreciated that and love that there's just like this wider Justice Catalyst network.
Thank you so much, Olivia. It's really wonderful to have your perspective join us. Just getting to hear directly from a fellow is really wonderful. And we're so proud and grateful for all the incredible work you've been doing in your fellowship. So, we're going to have a chance at the end to take questions from all of you. And if you have questions specifically for Olivia, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat box, and we will circle back to them at the end. With that, I want to dive into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of the application process. So first, I want to highlight a really critical aspect of the application, which is your theory of change. So there's a question on the application, and all of the application questions, I should mention, are available on the website right now. The application form itself won't be open until later, but the application questions are there. So, a theory of change is what connects your proposed approach to the problem that it seeks to address. And a theory of change can be really simple. It can be just a few sentences explaining the precise mechanism by which your project approach will lead to your hoped for outcomes. So, for example, a litigation-focused project might seek to directly transfer resources to a harmed community, enforce a law in a new factual environment, dissuade a bad actor from continuing their practices, demonstrate to other lawyers that a litigation theory is viable, or persuade a judge to articulate a favorable precedent. Even if sometimes it feels like it should be very obvious, connect the dots for us in your application from what the actions will be in your project to what the hoped for outcomes will be from those actions that you take. And again, the theory of change is really a key element of your project application. Not only does it tell us about the impact that your project seeks to make on the world, it also demonstrates to us a lot about how you think about your work and your project plan. And I also just want to note that if your project is in category 3, you'll likely need to explain in the theory of change section first how your project will lead to litigation being concretely filed, and then secondarily, what the effect of that litigation will be. Okay, so I've mentioned and provided a lot of concrete examples of past and current fellowship projects. I want to just make sure that you have access to that webpage. So we're dropping it in the chat again. There is a webpage of all current and past fellows that those of you watching the recorded webinar later will be able to access from our website to check those out. And keep in mind, we're looking for a really wide range of projects. So don't feel limited either by what you see on our website. Um, and as a reminder, in the past, we had a broader focus that was less litigation specific. So if you're looking at older projects, they may run the gamut in a way that more recent projects in the last couple of years don't. Those more recent projects will be reflective of the current types of projects that we are supporting that are litigation focused. Okay. I want to share with you a little bit about the prospectus stage of the application process. So, prospectus submissions will be open via a form on our website between September 1st and September 30th. And you will receive a response to your prospectus submission after you submit it through that form on our website on a rolling basis through early November. This short prospectus stage of our application process is really an opportunity for you to summarize for us the problem you seek to address and your idea for addressing it. The goal of this stage is for it to be a low time investment way for you to know whether you should take the time and energy to submit a full application. By getting feedback from us on whether your project is a good fit for the fellowship this year, and where appropriate for you to receive some specific suggestions from us on your final application. So we really encourage you to be succinct, use bullet points versus full sentences if that's easier. Simply include the basic information that'll allow us to understand what you intend to do and evaluate whether it's a good fit for submission of a full Justice Catalyst Fellowship application. And then in that prospectus, we also ask you to include a list of people, both lawyers and non-lawyers, that you have contacted or would like to speak with as part of developing your project, in addition to potential host organizations. So you don't have to know when you submit the prospectus who your host organization will be, although you should be pretty far along in those conversations by then, given that the deadline for the fellowship application is December 1. So the listening tour that Olivia mentioned really helps you gather a wide range of input that's really vital to developing your proposal and ensuring that your project work won't be duplicative or counterproductive. And also, as Olivia mentioned, those initial contacts may well turn into collaborations and partnerships during your fellowship itself. Again, you're not required to have secured a host organization by the time that you submit your prospectus, but we do highly recommend that you be very deep in conversations with potential host organizations at that stage. I want to just reiterate that the prospectus is intended to be a work in progress. We welcome the opportunity to work with you to turn that initial idea that you have into a more detailed plan of action. So please don't hesitate to submit a prospectus submission, even if you don't yet have a firm proposal. And then what can you expect in response to your prospectus submission? So the feedback will vary, but for the most part, it entails a pretty succinct email back to you that states one of three things. One, your proposed project sounds great, and we'd love to see a full application of it. Two, your proposed project may be a good fit, and we recommend that you make XYZ tweaks or additions and then submit a full application. Or your proposed project isn't a good fit for a Justice Catalyst Fellowship this year, and we don't recommend that you spend the considerable time and energy it can take to submit a full application. A common question I get on this is, does that mean you can't submit a full application if you get that response to your prospectus? No, it doesn't. You can disregard that feedback and still submit. And just be aware that based on the information we received in the prospectus, it didn't seem like it had a high likelihood of being a good fit, but we'll still absolutely review your full application. As I mentioned, I'm a former fellow, postgraduate legal fellow, and I spent so many hours on fellowship applications, some of which I will add were not successful. And so I really value and respect your time and energy and the time and energy of your host organizations. And I know that putting together a thoughtful, intentional fellowship application takes a lot of time and energy. So the goal of this prospectus is really to respect that time and energy of you and your host org and let you know early on whether or not you should invest more time and resources into submitting a full application. Another thing I want to add is we'll be dropping our email in the chat, fellowships@justicecatalyst.org. I welcome your inquiries heading into the prospectus stage about, requesting feedback on ideas. Please do listen to what I've said already about our focus and our emphasis and the three categories. And, let me know if you have project ideas that fit those categories. And if you want feedback, I really want to support you in coming up with an idea and a project plan that is going to be successful. So just reach out. If you reach out to me with something that's not a good fit or that needs work, please know I'm here to support you and collaborate with you to help put together an application and a project plan that is going to be successful. So no worries about reaching out with question marks or half-baked ideas. I am here to support you with that. I do want to say that we do receive hundreds of prospectuses, so we don't have the capacity to provide a lot of follow-up feedback to the prospectus submissions beyond what I shared would be, one of your three succinct responses. But again, reach out and we will do our best to be supportive to you throughout this process with any questions that you have, starting as early as today, if you'd like. Okay, a little bit about the final application. So, as I mentioned, application submissions will open via a form on our website. That form will be open between October 19th and December 1st. Um, Unlike the prospectus stage, the application is required. And I want to just note that there's a host commitment form and a contact information for two professional references that's asked for in the application. And we don't accept letters of recommendation. I'll also just add that we're not looking at things like what law school you went to or what your GPA is. We're looking for substance. So, a little bit on interviews and final decisions. So, interviews take place on a rolling basis between January and February of 2027. The interviews are friendly and focused on the concrete details of your project. We ask a lot of questions specific to the litigation that your project will focus on catalyzing or supporting or advancing. So for example, if you're doing a Category 1 project and your focus is on bringing significant affirmative litigation, we'll be curious to hear what is a hypothetical fact pattern and how would those facts apply to the potential legal claims you might be making. So getting into the nitty-gritty and really curious to hear your thinking, your theory of change, the potential challenges and possible solutions that you have for those challenges and obstacles. A little bit about the fellowship programming itself. So, the Justice Catalyst Fellowship is really interesting and unique to me, and I hope to you because it is so interdisciplinary and it focuses on such a wide range of issue areas and is based at so many different types of host organizations. And so, it's an incredible opportunity to build a peer community of other folks who are recently graduated from law school and interested in social impact litigation writ large. We do individual check-ins, we do group calls, we do workshops with national experts on a range of different issue areas. We have a book/movie club. There's opportunity for substantive collaboration if the opportunity arises on your project at times. And we have mentorship available too as well. So it's a really wonderful community, and we are really excited to welcome our incoming cohort into it this fall and welcome applicants into it in 2027. All right. Some frequently asked questions before we turn to the Q&A chat. So last year we were asked about whether specific types of internships, clinics, externships, or post-grad experiences, such as clerkships or other fellowships, can impact the strength of an application and how much of an impact those things have compared to the project and the placement on our assessment of the application. So the answer is that we're less concerned with checking off boxes on your resume than by demonstration of the way that you think about your project strategy vis-a-vis your theory of change and the potential impact of your project. We don't expect fellows to necessarily have a resume that indicates deep commitment over a long, extended period of time to just one issue area at this stage of their career either. However, we do find that folks who've been in an internship or externship at their host organization already, or have collaborated with that host organization through clinical work in law school, often have some of the strongest applications and best understanding of the issues that are relevant to their proposed project. Folks also often ask about acceptance rate and volume of applicants for the fellowship. We have between 10 and 20 fellows in our cohort each year, and we receive a couple hundred prospectuses. About half of those submit a full application, and we generally have about a 10% acceptance rate. We've also been asked whether we have a preference between 3L candidates and those who are up to 2 years out of law school, and we don't have a preference. Usually around 70% or so of those selected for the fellowship are current 3Ls when they apply, and the remainder are at least a year out of law school. If you've been in a fellowship already for a year out of law school, you are eligible to apply. We've also gotten questions about our renewal process. So, this is a fellowship that's guaranteed for 1 year. There's an option to request to renew your fellowship midway through your first year, and that renewal length will be anywhere between 3 to 12 additional months beyond that first year. The length of renewal depends on multiple factors, including how long the fellow wants to renew for, how long the host org wants to renew for, and how much more time we believe, based on where your project is at the time of the renewal application, how much more time is needed in order to accomplish the major goals of the project. Most fellows request to renew their fellowship. And one other thing I'll add is that sometimes renewals are supported in whole or part by our partner organization, Justice Catalyst Access Fund. And that has the advantage of potentially offering sustainable funding for the host organization beyond a second year, albeit with recoverable grants that are repaid out of fee recoveries. So, for example, we have a fellow alum from a couple years ago whose host organization wanted to keep him on as a permanent staff attorney coming out of his fellowship, and they were able to do so thanks to litigation funding support from Justice Catalyst Access Fund. If you want to learn more about Justice Catalyst Access Fund, you can find a lot more information about it on our website. We've also been asked whether candidates working remotely, hybrid, or in person are weighted any differently in reviewing applications. And the answer is that they're not, but we do take into account factors such as what type of work they'll be doing and whether it's conducive to remote work, and what type of mentorship and supervision they're likely to receive and need, depending on their experience level and their project proposal. And then finally, folks have had some confusion about the eligibility requirement for graduation date from law school. So candidates must be in their final year of a law degree, either JD or LLM, from a US accredited law school, or have graduated within 2 years of applying. So this means anyone who graduated in December 2024 or later is eligible to apply. And in limited cases, we also accept applications from non-attorneys, such as from jailhouse lawyers. You can find a whole list of additional frequently asked questions on our website. And again, if you have any questions that are not answered on the website or in this webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out at fellowships@justicecatalyst.org at any time. Okay, with that, we are going to close out our slides, and Olivia can join me back on video, and we are going to dig into some of the live questions that we have here today. And if you haven't yet had a chance to ask a question in the Q&A chat, please feel free to drop it in. I will just note that since some of you started asking questions earlier on, I am going to skip your question if I did already answer it. Okay, so let's see here. Does Justice Catalyst view strategic appeals seeking to enforce litigation as litigation? Yes, and it can be really specific to the type of work. So what I would say is this is a really good example of an opportunity to reach out to me via email at fellowships@justicecatalyst.org to ask about a specific idea that you have and or submit a prospectus to get some more specific feedback. Great substantive question. Can you speak more about what you mean to not rely on courts to agree with you or not focus on changing existing precedent, but using litigation or judicial review as the means of affecting social change or achieving the specific goals of the project? So essentially what I'm saying is we take a very pragmatic and legal realist approach to the law, and we have a big focus on projects that are enforcing already existing laws versus on precedential litigation. That can, there is some precedential work that we do support. And I'm just saying our big focus is on enforcing laws already on the books. What would you suggest for someone who doesn't have a host org in mind? Do fellows ever cold email host orgs? Excellent question. Absolutely. This is a wonderful opportunity to really um, put into action some of the concrete skills that you'll need as a strong litigator or attorney coming out of law school. Absolutely look at all of the general job boards, PSJD, Idealist. A lot of potential host orgs are already posting and recruiting for potential fellowship candidates. Some of them are specific about the exact postgraduate legal fellowships they're interested in finding candidates to apply for. And I should add, oftentimes folks will apply to multiple postgraduate legal fellowships with different iterations of a project idea. That's totally fine. And absolutely reach out, call, email, network, uh, seek out potential host organizations that might not even realize that they could host a Justice Catalyst Fellow. Again, this is an opportunity where the fact that we accept applications based a really wide range of types of host organizations is also a huge asset. A lot of public interest law firms, civil rights firms across the US, unions, and various government agencies might not even know that they can host a legal fellow. So, absolutely reach out to host orgs very proactively. Let them know about ideas that you have, talk to them about ideas they have, and find someone that's a good fit for your needs and your project's needs. How do candidates usually balance the fact that the fellowship is 1 to 2 years long with the reality that high impact work usually takes time? This is a key challenge of all postgraduate legal fellowships. And the fact is that you definitely need to work with a host organization for this reason that is really committed to this work, that's already working within the impacted communities that your project seeks to address, already has coalitions and relationships, has, been seeing potential issues that they could address through the type of project you want to bring, and that can continue to be a home for your project, both before and coming out of your project. This is another reason why Justice Catalyst Access Fund is also an excellent resource for potentially supporting host organizations on litigation coming out of a fellowship project as well. Okay. For a legal aid host organization, can affirmative litigation involve individual cases that address recurring or systemic issues, or are you primarily looking for class actions or other large scale litigation? Great question. For the most part, we are looking for class actions or other large scale litigation. With that said, especially for a Category 2 project, where you're starting a new affirmative practice area, some more individual cases that can be brought at scale and in a sustainable way with fee generation may be a good fit. However, we do need to hear about work where there's going to be a significant broad scale impact that's sustainable over time. Okay, how in the weeds should specific litigation proposals be? Does it make sense to identify specific statutory causes of action when they might be dismissed at a later stage? Good question. So, as I said, we are very aware that between the year plus that you submit your application and you begin work on your fellowship project, a lot will change. So, what we're really looking for is a pretty high level of specificity because it gives us more insight into the way that you are thinking about your theory of change, the level of deep and intentional thinking that you and your host organization have about the project. And we recognize that the specific causes of action may shift by the time that you actually start your project and dig in. But yes, a level of specificity really helps us understand kind of where your head's at with the project and your strategic approaches. Thanks for that question. Okay. And Olivia, if you see a question that you want to chime in and answer, feel free because we do have a high volume. So I'm just trying to make sure answering questions that a wide range of folks will benefit from hearing.
Yeah, no worries. I've been trying to answer some in the chat
Oh,
too.
thank you. Um, is there a benefit to submitting an application earlier in the cycle? Um, No, we are definitely going to read and review and carefully assess every single application. Every single application is going to be carefully considered. So, no benefit to submitting earlier in the cycle, although I don't mind if you do. Um, can a host take on two fellows? Yes. Even if they're from the same school? Yes.
Um, in terms of the person who asked, is it too late to start now for this year? I would say no, even if you don't have a host org yet. It just kind of depends on the host org. Some will like actually post fellowship sponsorship job postings, but others you can just kind of cold email and reach out to see like, hey, would you be willing to take on a fellow? And I feel like for those especially, it wouldn't be too late to do that, and you still have some time before all of the deadlines in the fall and winter.
I couldn't agree more with that, Olivia. Thank you. So we have another question here. Can the project be more local, such as a statewide project, or focusing on a particular geographic area than a national-based project? That's an excellent question. Yes, absolutely. And our focus is on high volume, broad scale impact. So think about a region or think about if you're doing it more locally, a region that is going to have an impact that is large scale or that can be replicated more broadly coming out of your project that would end up having a broader scale impact. Okay, let's see here. What does a specific litigation project look like if it's supporting a host organization's case after the filing stage? Great question. So, what we want to hear in that type of project is basically having a fellow come on to support this litigation will be absolutely critical to us getting through major elements of the litigation that will be critical to its success. So, in order to get through the motion to dismiss, we need a fellow to come on to project manage the litigation, coordinate with our co-counsel, etc. And that timing is kind of what we're anticipating based on where the litigation will likely be when that project commences. So something like that, where we're hearing, having the extra hands and resource of a fellow will be really critical to the success of the litigation to get through critical elements of that particular litigation. Okay, let's see what else. Is the prospectus option only for current applicants, or can you submit a prospectus if you're applying in a future year? Great question. Yes, for prospectus submissions, focus on submitting a prospectus that you plan to submit a full application for by this December cycle. If you have questions about project ideas that you're considering for future years, for future application cycles outside of this current cycle, email me, set up a meeting with me, and let's talk. And I want to support you in thinking that through. Let's see here. Has a selected candidate ever been able to defer to the next cycle, or would they need to reapply? They would need to reapply. Thank you for that question. So in this application cycle, we are looking for folks who can start in 2027. Decisions are made in the early spring. We are really flexible about start date, so folks are welcome to start anytime within 2027. They don't have to start in the fall. We do often have a large cohort of the incoming group of fellows who start in the fall, coming out of taking the bar exam, for example. But totally flexible to start within 2027. Okay, I think we have gotten to all of the questions that are going to be useful for a wide range of folks. Oh, great question. Given the timeline of the fellowship, what is the etiquette of applying for jobs while the application is pending? We know that folks need to apply for jobs and may apply to multiple fellowships. We completely understand that. So, what we ask is that if you are anticipating, if you get an offer, or if do an interview with us and know that there's a potential other offer pending or on the horizon, please just communicate with us transparently about that. If you get another offer and you accept it, please let us know right away. Um, and that's all that we ask. Okay, really wonderful questions. Olivia, is there anything else that you kind of wish you had understood more clearly going into the application process? I know it's been a minute for you now. Or is there anything else that you want to share about kind of taking advantage of the fellowship once you have it? Anything like that?
Um, I think for the application process, I found the prospectus helpful to just kind of gauge like how Justice Catalyst was thinking about the project. So I would just say really spending time with that and kind of making sure it's your best efforts. And then that also, from what I remember, was helpful in terms of like putting together the actual application because the questions were pretty much the same. So yeah, really just focusing your time and efforts on getting that prospectus to be in good shape, and then tweaking it based on the feedback.
Wonderful. That's really helpful. Another thing that folks often ask, and I don't know if I answered, is you can submit multiple prospectuses. Please don't hit us with like 20. Maybe a handful if you have various project ideas. And again, you can also reach out to me via email. Please do, if you're going to reach out via email, or submit a prospectus, be aware of the basic information on the website. But if you want to get into a little bit more substance, or strategy, or have some support on your theory of change, please don't hesitate to reach out. I really am here as a resource to support you all. Okay, I think we have gotten to all of our questions and we've covered all of our content. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Olivia, for joining us as well. And we are really excited to see all of your prospectuses, applications, and meet some of you during the interview process. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again so much for joining.